Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I like to discuss the latest buffoonery from political chameleon Liz Truss, who is one of the big reasons potentially that Boris Johnson is still Prime Minister. Thanks to her numptiness, what was already a stupid plan for the Northern Ireland Protocol blew up in Johnson's face earlier this week, as Truss either couldn't manage a simple task or deliberately sabotaged Johnson for her own personal gain. Either way, the idiocy on display from her this week is what arguably a lot of sensible Tory MPs fear as the new norm if they get rid of Johnson, which they need to do, only for their more limited colleagues to end up voting to replace him with Liz Truss. You could say this is a video on how it might be Liz Truss's stupidity that is keeping Boris Johnson in power. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So when Liz Truss was given the job of Northern Ireland Protocol negotiations, after David Frost spat his dummy out and resigned, it initially looked good. I've done several videos where I've said Liz Truss is taking a much more open attitude here. You know, after throwing out the obligatory threats to trigger Article 16, which I repeat does not mean what the media tells you it means, she actually settled into a useful dialogue with Maros Šefčovič, the Deputy EU Commission President, who's also dealing with the negotiations. Truss was adopting the line of recognising that a negotiated outcome was the only credible endgame here. But Liz Truss is a lot more like Boris Johnson than some may realise. She's got no real political convictions. She'll adopt whatever position is needed to advance her career. Like, you do expect people to shift position a bit on certain issues as politicians, because as politicians you're thrust into the world of politics and you start to see things in different ways, and of course you can change your position. You know, it's only the rigidly dogmatic that will not do so. But her political journey has been quite something. So as clear as it is, even to her, that only a negotiated settlement is feasible, if she needs to appeal to the ERG crowd to retain her chances of becoming the next Prime Minister, that's what she'll do. You may think that the government's announcement this week to go ahead with legislation to override the protocol in British law was all worked out in advance, and maybe it was, but Truss jumped the gun. The government seemed preoccupied with what the United States think of the situation. A bit weird for me, because the US haven't actually threatened sanctions if the UK breaks the withdrawal agreement. Surely the main focus should be on what the EU would do, because they have been rather clearer about the consequences. But whatever is being said behind closed doors, the UK government are desperate to get the US on side. They have spent the last 2 years sending people across the Atlantic to persuade Congress and the White House of our need to break our own treaty, to justify it. A fool's errand. Not only is Johnson's government massively in the wrong here, both legally and morally, but the Irish lobby is very powerful on Capitol Hill. Johnson has about as much chance of persuading the US to ignore his antics in Ireland as I would of putting a sausage on the floor and telling our idiot dogs not to eat it. Indeed, all previous attempts have failed spectacularly. But they were trying again this week. The focus seemed to be persuading the president this time. Yes, the one who identifies strongly as an Irish American. That's the one. Their envoy this time was Conor Burns, a junior minister in the Northern Ireland office. He was probably telling the White House that the EU were being mean when Liz Truss leaked the plans for legislation to dismantle the protocol. I gather it made Burns look more than a little stupid. The reaction to the leak was predictable enough. The EU reiterated the consequences that they'd first expressed last autumn, including the complete dissolution of the Trade and Cooperation Agreement potentially. The US has also explained that they see breaking the protocol as a clear threat to the Good Friday Agreement. And you might think this was all part of Boris Johnson's plan. I certainly did to a certain extent. After all, he'd already threatened this legislation. We know he's fairly focused on the here and now. What is his major problem? His major problem right now is not the EU, it's not the US, it's the ERG and his party. What's the problem at the moment that's poking them? The DUP. So he just says whatever he needs to do to get through that week. You know, Northern Ireland Secretary Brandon Lewis pulled back from this position just before the Stormont elections, but then Johnson went to Belfast on Monday to try and persuade the DUP to at least let Stormont get back to work. The promise of this legislation was part of the plan to unlock that cooperation. But according to reports, Boris Johnson was actually pissed off that Truss leaked the news of this bill, which leaves us wondering why Truss did it. Was it a pitch to the ERG in anticipation of the challenge to Johnson's leadership that is long overdue, but never seems to come? Possible. Truss seems to enjoy decent support amongst party members. Not as much as before. It is waning. Maybe she's actually got a bit of an eye on it now. There was a time a few months ago when there was a lot of pressure on Johnson. Sunak was the one who was really poking at it because he saw his approval ratings in the party going down and he knew he needed to act then. It's like now or never. It's gone now. Maybe Liz Truss, she was a bit more careful then. She was a bit more circumspect. She was riding high. Maybe she sees the same thing. Her star's waning a little bit. Maybe she thinks she needs to get a hurry on. And to have a chance of the top job, she needs to be one of the 2 leadership challengers who gets down to the final round. If that happens, with her popularity as it is now, she has a chance of winning. But she needs just over a third of Tory MPs to back her to be guaranteed to be on that ballot. Now, more sensible Tory MPs are unlikely to do this for reasons I'll go over in a bit, but the ERG are a ready-made large voting bloc in the parliamentary party. She may decide that her best bet is to appeal to them, and this stunt would help her do it. It would be, in a not-so-subtle way, demonstrate that she is willing to adopt a harder line on the protocol than Boris Johnson, and certainly any of the obvious contenders for his job, if and when he's made to walk the plank. Of course, it's possible that Truss just messed it up as well. She's not bright. I've said before, she's not in the bottom half of intelligence in the cabinet, but that is a low bar. I mean, she's not on the same level as like Nadine Dorries, who was at it again this week. But Nadine Dorries is not a credible alternative for Prime Minister. It would be briefly hilarious if they actually made her the next Prime Minister. Labour would win a lot of seats at the election, but that's not going to happen. They're not that daft. I mean, for example, this week, Liz Truss tried to defend the junior minister, Rachel Maclean, who said that people who are struggling with inflation should just work more hours or get a better job. Truss said that her words had been mischaracterised. So the journalist interviewed her and straight away said, how? That's what she asked. How was it mischaracterised? Then Liz Truss had to say, oh, I don't know, I didn't watch the interview. So basically she doesn't know. And this lack of wit and preparation is evident all the time. Like with Boris Johnson. Like in the dispatch box in Commons debates, Johnson gets away with it because he just blatantly lies. He never gets caught out. You know, you look at him and he sometimes gets upset, but he never gets caught out because he just lies. He just makes things up. But Liz Truss struggles with that. So she gets stitched up every time by her opposite number on the opposition benches. Yeah, because she's not as good at lying as blatantly as Johnson. If Johnson were deposed and Truss replaced him, her flailing attempts at debate would reach a wider audience as she would be plunged into the crucible of Prime Minister's questions. At the moment she gets away with it, most people don't pay attention to her turns at the dispatch box. You know, she'd do no better against one of the country's top prosecutors than Johnson has. Rather worse, in fact. You know, she may start off with more regard amongst the public. I think anyone would when Johnson's gone. But how long would it last when she doesn't even have Johnson's skill in the art of mindless waffle? And this, I think, is a big part of the puzzle as to why Boris Johnson's still in place. The Tories know he's an electoral drag. If they want to win, and that's a big if, it's a question I shall tackle tomorrow as well. But if they want to win, like, they're getting another 5 weeks, they're going to be getting the results of the by-election for both Wakefield and Tiverton and Honiton. Both were won by the Conservatives at the last election. Both are expecting to lose them next month. Doesn't mean they will, they could win both, but they're expecting to lose them. The latter is a very safe Tory seat as well. But even Conservative MPs are resigned to losing it. It's not certain they'll lose it, like I say. It is, after all, a really safe seat. But such is the drag effect of Boris Johnson now. You feel that in a by-election at least, there's no such thing as a safe Tory seat. They can afford to let Johnson carry on a little longer, but surely not until the next election, if they want to win. So what are they waiting for? Well, there are various political calculations at play, but Liz Truss is surely a big one of them. Let us say we get to the end of June, and it brings with it 2 by-election losses for the Conservatives, one in the red wall to Labour, one in their blue wall to the Lib Dems. The Met Police, of course, have now concluded their investigation. The Sue Gray report's supposed to be out next week. Let us say that it gets released properly, because Boris Johnson's basically the editor of it. He can take an awful lot out. But let's say it is properly published, that he can't really stop it for fear of it looking like a stitch-up. Let us say that the publication is as damaging as some think it must be. The Privileges Committee also will have begun their investigation. I don't know how long that will take, but let's say by the end of next month the prognosis is not good for Boris Johnson. Let's say the Tories don't want to wait for the summer recess, because then they'll come back afterwards for the mess of potentially a leadership divorce going on as the party conference season starts. So let's say they want to act before it gets that far. There's a real fear for some that Liz Truss could become the next leader. She's not bright. She would do very poorly in debates. She's vain, just like Johnson, so the public will soon see her for what she is. She'll be just as weak during a crisis as Johnson, and so the country will continue to spiral downwards, generating more public anger. Truss is currently in the process of spending £20 million of our money on what has been termed a party house for British diplomats in New York. She's already known for wasting excessive amounts of money on over-extravagant restaurant bills when holding meetings. During a cost of living crisis, Liz Truss would continue spending with reckless abandon on luxuries while the rest of the country goes without. It would be madness to remove Johnson only to end up with Truss. And the MPs who realise this may be waiting with Johnson because they fear getting another empty political vessel in return. Until they can be sure that Johnson can only be replaced by someone who will be clearly better, they may keep waiting. But will that ever happen? But those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. I hope you found the video interesting. If you did, please click the like button, maybe even click on the join button if you'd be interested in memberships. And until next time, I'll see you later.